as first generation Christians, how do I go about explaining to my family members who may be unsaved what we believe and the boundaries that we set for our family? Also, how do we go about enforcing those boundaries at family gatherings? So this, I think, was a question or a scenario I run into a lot in our churches. We have many first-generation Christians who their parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents, none of them are saved or even hold any of those values. So I'll just start Pastor Matthews, and we'll just kind of start answering that question. But what would you suggest somebody do, or how do they approach it with their unsaved family?
Yeah, so I would say to definitely be gentle with your family. You don't want to burn any bridges, but at the same time, you want them to just understand that you have decided that you're going to serve God in this manner, that the Bible has given, instructions on how you ought to lead your life, and you want to abide by that. And hopefully, your family will, understand that you have convictions, you have certain standards that you want to live to, and it's not a time to start a fight or go after them because they're not saved or they're not on board with you. It's just a time to just let them know, hey, I would appreciate it if you acknowledge that I have my beliefs and I'm serving God, and you have your beliefs, and that's why we won't be at the family reunion this year, or what have you. And so that's how I would say to approach that.
All right.
Yeah, I agree. You have to always remember that you're the one that changed. If you're a first generation Christian, you used to be what they were. So then if all of a sudden you're coming out swinging and condemning them, they're just going to see you as a hypocrite because they've not had a chance to see any change in your life. They're not going to understand these things. And so I think you ought to be very careful in how you approach that. I think you need to be respectful to them, but ask them to be respectful to you. Also, if you have a history of changing things all the time and getting involved in different stuff, you got to understand, if you're doing the right thing, it is going to convict them. And so there's a good chance they might respond very negatively towards you, kind of testing you. And you've just got to let it happen. You've got to make sure you show them you love them even more than you did before, that you're not trying to judge them, and then you're going to have to prove yourself. And that's going to take time. And there's a good chance they might work against you at first. But just remember, you're the one that changed. You used to be where they were. And so, by all means, stick with these convictions that God has given you, but do it in the most loving, gentle way you can.
Yeah, I like what Pastor Murphy said there. Remember, you're the one that changed. There's nothing worse than trying to help someone who got saved. And by the way, you should have convictions, and you should have standards, and you should be separated. But you can't require your unsaved family to live by your newfound rules and guidelines. And so remember, those are standards that you have for your home. So one of the big ones I run into is alcohol. Like, if the family reunions have an alcohol, we won't be there. Well, you can't ask that your unsaved family all become sober and no longer drink anymore. But you can say, hey, could you at least refrain while I'm there, and then I'll leave early, and then you can't ask for them to become something that you all of a sudden have become. So find ways to not ask them to stop these actions or change their behavior as much as just accommodate, hey, while my kids are around, I don't want them to hear swear words. I don't want them to see drinking. Could you at least help me out with that? And then when if let's say swear words and they slip up, understand there's a difference between a slip up and someone trying to intentionally corrupt your kid. If your uncle slips up and says a swear word, oh, I'm sorry, don't go in fight mode. Like, it's different than if they're just doing it and you'll know as your family, they're your family. You should know. And so I just encourage you to be patient with them. Don't burn any bridges, as Pastor Matthew said. Too many people have done that. They get saved and then they excommunicate any family member for the silliest reasons. I mean, just things that you'll go to a restaurant and watch everybody in that restaurant drink alcohol, and you're not going to excommunicate them. But you'll do that to you'll live in a wicked world, but your family messes up in these little areas. So, no, we're not saying don't have standards. We're just saying keep them in perspective and be very delicate when you're handling them. Remember, it might be your parents you're dealing with. They're your parents. And it's going to be hard for you to teach them anything